I'm attorney Phil Giacino, and this is WLINY's Finding Common Ground here on Altice. You can catch this show on Saturdays at 10 a.m. on Channel 115 and also Thursday morning, 1 a.m. on Channel 20. My special guest for this evening is Leslie Kennedy. She's a Suffolk County legislator, 12th Judicial District, but 12th Legislative District.
Right.
And you're also a friend of the Lake Grove Chamber of Commerce. You come down to the meetings often. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I was elected in 2015. What else can I say? I'm a mom of 4 adult children, a grandmother of 8, which
Wow.
is, yeah, they're all babies. Seriously.
And you were a nurse?
I was a nurse for 30 years. Ran a small
That's a big deal.
business. Yeah. I lived in the real world. Did a lot of 2 jobs at a time. And I worked for Donald Blydenberg as a legislative aide. I left.
I've been before him. He was a judge for a
Yep.
number of years, and I appeared before him often. Good guy. Was a good
I
guy.
worked in the same district office that I run now.
And you were elected what year? In
2015 in March.
2015. And you took over for who?
I took over from my wonderful, lovely husband.
And he had been there for 10 years.
He had been there for 10 years.
So there's been a Kennedy in the 12th Legislative District for quite a while.
Yes.
Good thing.
Yes.
And what exactly, and I know the answer to this, but some of the viewers might not, what exactly does a legislator in the county of Suffolk do?
A legislator in the county of Suffolk does a lot of things, but mostly it is policy. You write and you vote on legislation, what's happening as of
You
late.
make the laws of Suffolk County.
Correct, all of them. Plus, my office, our office, is huge on constituent services. So we make our constituents the most important part of our job. And frequently, I get about 800 emails a day. Try to answer them all.
What does your area cover, since we know exactly the area that you
I
handle?
I go to Oxhead in Centeridge, right before Walmart.
Right.
And I go all the way to Town Line Road in Comac-Huntington border.
Okay.
I have St. James, I have Hauppauge, I have a lot.
Now, you said you do a lot of policy. What kinds of the issues of the day have you been dealing with lately?
Well, since I came in, it's one large spending thing after another. The mortgage tax, $530, I think it is now. When you take out a mortgage, when you pay off your mortgage, when you do an adjustment to your mortgage, it's a horror. I voted no. What else do we do? The cameras, red light cameras, I also voted no. It's cremation fee. There's fees after fees after fees. We continue, for some strange reason, to collect a lot of money, but no one ever knows where it really goes, because we always seem to need more. And it's a frightening perspective. We are working right now. I have a bill in with another legislator. The state is talking about the okaying recreational marijuana. I want to put a hold on it for a while, opt out for a while, until they get a test that can be done on site of an accident by a police officer. And the state is, in its marvelous thought pattern, did not choose to change the penal code in any way. So I would like to know that if I'm, or anyone, is high and driving a car and I kill a family, I should automatically be tested for my THC level.
No,
and I'd like to know what's a felony, what level is a felony as a nurse, what level is a misdemeanor, and what level is just a...
Like with alcohol, it's very simple.
Right. It is. And marijuana, it's they have not developed
stays
a
in your
lot of
system
that.
a lot longer.
30 days, if at minimal.
So you could have it in your system, but might not be under the influence of it. But how do you tell?
Well, if you have it in your system, it's still affecting you in some ways.
Right, but I know, like I do a lot of family court work, and some of those tests can go back 30, 60, 90 days in your system.
Right.
Now, you could have some marijuana in your system maybe from 60 days ago.
Right, but the THC levels would be much lower.
So we have to have a test where it's a lot easier.
Much.
And as a former prosecutor, I would need to know what I'm dealing with.
Absolutely.
Especially if it's a fatality,
Absolutely.
you got to know.
And the THC itself, I have a real difficult time with them doing this, because how does something go from being a gateway drug to being a fine and dandy to get on a roadway drug? And having worked in addictions, I know that that's a fallacy. That's an absolute fallacy. So we have to make sure that the changes are done by the state prior to us even thinking about getting into
Now,
this.
as far as opting out, like you can opt out of Common Core as a parent, what do you think the state or Governor Cuomo might say if a county wants to opt out? Is there anything that he can do to us?
Oh, well, he's the governor. He can do many things. There's gossip at this point, because I haven't read anything or seen anything, that we might be punished if we choose to opt out.
Losing some funds?
Of course, losing funding. But we have to check that out. We have to see what the true story is in there. But I'm a big fan of life.
Me too.
I would much rather opt out until we know what's really going on in there, and perhaps that will force us to live within our means.
Sure. Now, what are the challenges as a legislator when you're in the minority?
Yep.
There are more Democrats than Republicans. What's the
Correct.
latest numbers?
There are 7 of us and 11 of them.
11 Democrats, 7
Yeah.
Republicans. So
Yes.
in the
But
minority.
Monica has just been elected, so there is still that vacant spot. So it's really 10 of them and 7 of us. We're down
Okay, so
one.
it's getting closer.
Yeah.
But what are the challenges that you face trying to do your job when you're in the minority?
Well, the only advantage at this point with 7 is we can hold back a bonding issue if we all vote together.
Team up.
Yeah, that's the only thing that we can do. We can lose on everything else, pretty much.
Do you have that kind of caucus? Do you have the teamwork of the Republicans to try to do certain things?
On some issues, yes. On other issues, we're pretty good. We allow our something that may affect me will not affect another legislator, and sometimes, depending on the cost and whatever, we make amends for that. You can
Right.
opt out of that. And I have to say, the Democrats don't all vote together always either. So it's...
When I interviewed your husband, John, I got the impression that he feels strongly that Suffolk County has got to get its fiscal house in order.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Do you think the legislature is doing its job to reach that end?
I have, I guess, a different view on government. You elect your government officials not to take care of you from cradle to grave. There is a very prevalent feeling with the majority that if someone asks for something, we must immediately jump, bond out, and give it to them. I think that government has some basic rules, health and safety, infrastructure, and a few other things. There will always be greater and less, so we have to have a Department of Social Services. There are a couple of things that we must mandate and do. But when you are so deeply in debt and bonding out at such a great rate, we have to prioritize better. So I don't think...
And in a sense, it could be kicking the can down the road for future generations that have to pay the bill on some of these things.
Well, look at Nassau. They operate, and see no problem operating in a huge deficit on it year after year after year. It's not an issue for them.
There's
Not an
got to be
issue
a
at
day of
all.
reckoning when you,
Well,
when you
well,
do that.
I wonder, it's been going on for what, 6 years? Oh, that they've been in a truly bad way. And we're getting close to our day of reckoning. We will, I don't know if we can declare bankruptcy at some point in time, but it's coming. If we continue at the rate we're going, it's a possibility.
Got to get the bond rating up. That's one thing.
Well, that means we have to spend what we take in, not greater.
But as I was saying to John, the government is not very good at tightening its budget. A family knows they have a budget, and if they spend more than that, there's going to be a problem.
Yes.
They may have to file bankruptcy, or you can't live above your means.
John and I go by the basis of, we call what is the budget OPM, other people's money.
Right.
So you have to be even more careful with other. I don't know why we feel this way and no one else seems to feel this way. You have to be more careful with other people's money.
I think so.
You know, that's what you have to do. More responsible. We're responsible, of course, with our own money, but much more responsible with other people's money. Yeah, we have to tighten our belts.
And you know what? And the voting public has to hold everybody who's a public official
Accountable.
accountable. There's got to be accountability.
Yeah. Well, there are some cuts being made. Unfortunately, they're all partisan. So the Republicans put in a bill. We went back to Steve Ballone's budget. We did not take the legislative budget group's budget because, in the majority of our opinion, it had a lot of wasted fluff. Too much additional funds put back in there. And the sales tax was estimated for this year to go up. A few things were projected to go up much higher than, we thought was really actually going to happen, all those things would put us in a greater hole. So we gave the county executive back his budget. We have an issue called hotel motel tax. The comptroller collects hotel motel tax, and it can go to two things: cultural and historic issues, and it's divided up traditionally between the legislators. I think I have 5 cultural things that I fund somewhat. My concert series, or that it's not mine, but I fund the Wisconsin concert series in the summer, a few other things, and then some of my historic properties I assist in funding. I was cut $17,000, which I consider a tremendous amount. Because it's some of these only get $5,000 or $4,000. I was cut $17,000 and change in the county executive's bill that we will be voting on. We, the Republicans, are putting in another bill that is much more fair, that cuts everybody about 4%, 3 to 4%.
Yeah, but what are the chances of that bill passing?
Well, let's see. There's always a chance.
Well, I guess you got to say, look.
You have to be fair and equitable. You don't just cut
Right.
one party. That's my opinion,
But even if you're not sure if a bill will pass, you still have to do what you think is right.
correct.
And let the consequences be darned.
Correct,
so to
correct.
speak.
You have to be fair and equitable to everyone. What I always remember is, as an elected official, if you didn't vote for me, I still represent you.
Right.
And when people become partisan with the constituents of other people's districts, you're hurting them. You're not hurting the representative. You're hurting the people. So
Yeah, we're all in this together. We're Suffolk County
have to.
residents. And, of course, some people see things differently, but,
Right.
we're all in this together. We got a great county, a lot of resources.
tremendous.
And that's why it's hard to believe sometimes when you say, we're having money problems. But we're not Detroit beholden to, let's say, one industry. We have a lot of different industries
We
here.
are doing some wonderful things. We really are. We just have to step back for a little while. Do a reassessment, and as money comes in, spend it like you do on your own. It's not that difficult to realize. At this point, our borrowing, our interest rate, just keeps going up and up and up and up and up and up and up, and I don't know how much longer we can tolerate that. I really don't.
Right, John described it as like a plane hurtling toward the earth, and you gotta pull it out at some point.
Airplane, I think of it as the toilet going down.
Now, what are some of the bills? Is vaping one of the controversial bills that you're
vaping
dealing
is
with?
there. I'm still getting emails every day. Yeah, Dr. Spencer put in a bill, because children are vaping in classes at this point. It's the Juul is about this big, and they can hold it in the palm of their hand and vape while the teacher turns them back to write on the board or his thing. It's frightening. They can't go into the stores to buy it, but older siblings are buying it, and some parents are buying it for their
Would it be
children.
18?
What you have to? I think it's 18 at this point. No, isn't it 21? I can't even remember what the age is. But you're not they're not old enough. School children
Sure.
are not old enough, so it's probably 18 in there. We had the entire legislature filled with people talking about it. Vape store owners, people from the equivalent of a union in there, and reasonable human beings. I didn't think it was going to be. They said, fine us if we serve a child. If we let a child come in, we check the IDs. There's some problems with some ID things. Work on that, but fine us, and don't fine us a little amount. Fine us $5,000. Give us a couple of times and that's it. If you find that we've done it again, take away our store. Don't just take away our store. What this bill, the bothersome was that the adults felt that they were being penalized, the adults that were using this to stop smoking. Now, as a former smoker, there are over 400 chemicals in a cigarette that are bad for your system. The FDA just got the list of chemicals from each of the vape manufacturers in each of their things. It has not come out because the government was closed for 3 weeks. So we don't know, but I am guesstimating that it's less than the 400 that are in cigarettes. So people are using the vape in order to quit smoking. Doc Spencer's bill did away with all the flavorings because they felt that that's enticing to the children that shouldn't be in the stores anyway, and only allowed for tobacco flavoring and menthol flavoring. But as a former smoker, no one will ever stop smoking because that continues. When you're young and you start smoking, you normally start with a menthol flavored cigarette because it's calmer, and has some taste to it, and then the smell and taste of nicotine is just perpetuating your smoking addiction. So that was what most of the people complained
But the
about.
bill wouldn't outlaw these,
All the flavors,
just the flavors, so
which is
a big deal.
it's a huge deal for the adults. The adults need a diversion in order to cut themselves down from smoking. And it's not the kids who like the cotton candy. It's the housewives
But what's
that
this-
want the cotton candy.
What's the status of that bill?
Doc Spencer, just this week, just the end of last week, I got news that he's tabling the bill. He's been meeting with a bunch of excellent resources. They've been sharing with me what they've discussed with him. It's looking decent. He's rewriting it.
I see.
So,
How about the plastic bags?
how about those plastic bags? I voted no on the plastic bags, not because I am not environmentally sensitive, but because we are virtually paying the stores the nickel. Nothing goes back to any kind of education or any kind of change making or any kind of anything. The issues with that were the largest manufacturer of the plastic bags, I think, was in Melville. So we'd be killing our own
Right.
businesses.
I think it has made people, and not even so much the environment, they don't want to pay the 5 cents for the bag, so they'll walk out like this, or bring their own bag.
John and I always remember now to bring the bags to the grocery store. It took us a while. But when you go into Macy's, it never crosses my mind, and we walk out like,
Right. Like when you go to Whole
Like
Foods,
this.
they were doing it
Yeah.
before,
yes.
very environmentally conscious.
I did not feel, I felt that the purpose of that bill was solely so that Suffolk could be the first county to pass a plastic bag bill. That
You know, it's
was
funny,
the whole-
they could raise the price of the product you're buying $1, you'll
But
buy
a
it.
nickel.
But that nickel, just the principle of it. I don't want any bags. Like when you go to Home Depot, like the kiosk, how many bags you need. I'll put it in the cart, push it out, and then put it back in my car so I don't use any of the bags.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, look, if it helps the
Stubborn.
environment, but you're right, the nickel is going to the store.
To the man, yeah. And there's no exception. Some of the stores tell their workers that it does not go to them, that it goes to the county, but that's not the truth. And there,
Now, I know there's been some flooding issues in Smithtown.
oh, yeah.
It's funny, it's a quick story. When I was, I think, in college, I came back, I was living in the Bronx, Fordham University, and I went to lunch with a friend of mine right on Main Street, Smithtown.
Mm-hmm.
and it was an Italian restaurant we went to, I forget the name of it. And it rained so hard that the street flooded.
Oh.
We had to go out the back, roll up our
Yeah.
pants and walk around the back. I must have been like 20, whatever it was. And you're talking about over 30 years ago. My parents live on Moore Drive, which is a big
Okay,
hill.
yeah.
So we never had a flooding issue. Maybe the people at the bottom of the hill had it. But what's going on with that?
If you take a geology class anywhere in the United States, you will learn about the Smithtown clay. It's a very thick, irregular clay. All the red brick that we have here came from the Smithtown clay.
What does it prevent the quick absorption of the water?
Definitely. From rain, snow, sleet, and hail. But we also have a tremendous rise in groundwater on a 7 to 9 year cycle because the Smithtown clay is variable and it slides and runs and it pools, and when it gets to a certain level, it rises. We're in year 9 right now. People are pumping. They have 4 and 5 pumps in their basements.
Yeah, what part of Smithtown is
They
mostly
were-
affected by that?
It's not just Smithtown. Lake Ronkonkoma, part of Wisconsin, part of Hauppauge by the Springs. Pretty much 90% of Smithtown in some area. I think that's basically, no St. James that I've taken care of over the years. I think that's basically it. It's about 1,900 homes
Right.
in there, and we're dealing with that now.
Yeah, what kind of things can the legislature do? What kind of laws can they pass?
Well, under John, we did 2 stream bed remediations. What happens is, over the years, the natural streams become occluded. No one has been taking care of them. Used to be done by CETA workers years ago. They would come in the summer and clip back and, pull the nonsense out. So we did a walk with the town of Smithtown engineers, Ted Sanford, and a few constituents years ago, and we saw that our stream beds were drastically occluded. They also had tremendous amounts of sand. That a lot of our culverts were non-functional because what would happen is the overflow of sand and leaves would hit the bottom of the culvert, stack into the culvert, and fill the culvert up, so the water would backflow in there. And this was all over town, all over town.
Is it an expensive fix?
First project was 1.8 in federal funds.
I was going to say,
We
federal,
did a
get some
grant.
federal funds.
1.2 was the second project. We're on the third. It just started in Village of the Branch. That was, when we got it, was almost $1 million, and then we had to add 200,000 to it.
Any state money involved?
It depends, a federal, state, in combination, whether you get it from a DEC grant, wherever you get it from. And the next one, when this one is finished, which should be the end of February, the next one will be close to a $2 million project. It's Miller's Pond.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. I also put in a bill that was a capital project 3 years ago, almost as soon as I came in to office, to test the Miller's Pond weir to see if we could fit it with an electronic part, because right now, when the water is rising rapidly, we're driving there twice a day to check the levels
Really?
and figuring out whether we should pull a board or not pull a board. And that's manually done with 2 people that have to come from the South Shore.
I used to
So,
skate on the pond
Did
as
you
a
really?
kid.
Yeah.
Years ago when things were, I guess, colder.
What is it?
And,
No, it's frozen now.
You still can?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I wouldn't, now it's
Yeah.
only about that thick, but it's.
But I used to go
frozen.
all the way down there. It's a big pond. You
It's
don't realize
huge,
it.
it's huge. It goes all the way to 111.
Right. If you
And
skate
then
it, you
over, yeah,
realize. But
yeah.
I'm saying, like, if you just drive past it, it's a
Yeah,
small
yeah,
entrance,
yeah.
relatively small entrance, and it goes around. But were houses nearby there having problems when it would overflow?
Across the street is Brady Park. Yeah. The house is behind it in Brady Park where.
Where the baseball
some
fields are
years,
and all that? Yeah, I used to play Little League
yeah,
over there as a
yeah.
kid.
I didn't realize that it was as bad as it was until one day we were driving down Maple Avenue, and I'm looking, and water is coming over the sides, not where the sand is, where you park your car.
Right.
Nothing. Not where the weir is, but over the sides of where
Yeah.
the trees are.
I think where you pull in is a little bit higher.
Yeah.
And then like when you drive down,
Well, it's pretty high where the
You see the
road is, but
Mhm.
water was backflowing up and then coming out onto the street, which caused us to whip around and take a look and say, oh no, and then make calls to find out how bad it was. I knew a friend of mine who lives in the neighborhood over there was pumping, but I didn't know that it was as bad as it was. But we're working on it. That finally passed after 2 tablings.
now why does a bill get tabled? Because it might not be enough support? Or it needs to be reworked?
Because one of the legislators says, this sounds really stupid, it's only... That's exactly the reason. That's exactly the reason, because they don't understand what a weir does. They don't understand that now they have electronic pressure measurements like the Aswan Dam, where the pressure itself can cause it to raise, or you can go with the cheaper model where, it gets to a certain height and then they hit a button and it raises a certain amount. You don't have to pull a whole board. You can raise it this much, causing, less flow. And they don't understand that. We've
So-
unfortunately been working with this for 16 years, so we understand it very well.
Now when a bill gets tabled, what has to happen for it to come back to be voted on?
It automatically, if it's tabled, it goes back up at the next committee cycle.
Automatically?
Yeah, but because this bill was a capital project, if it had failed, I would have had to wait till next year to put it in as another capital project. And I would have been bumped, capital projects are on a 3-year
Mhm.
cycle, I would have been bumped to 3 years from now, which,
Oh, I see.
would have made people have to suffer longer.
Mhm. And just briefly, what other budgetary issues is the county facing?
It's basically spending more than we take in. We have to come up with better solutions as ways to earn money. We don't earn money. We take in a small amount in taxes, really. That's what we do. These additional funds, additional people were hired in the county.
If property taxes go up, I know some of that's school.
Well, we say the property taxes do not go up, but they do. The police tax, the police district tax goes up for the county. The base general fund tax, they keep that stable so that they can say they didn't raise your taxes. But to me, the school raises your taxes, the police district tax, we're raising your taxes.
Now, who's tasked with, let's say, there's going to be some cuts to funding, all right? Does that come from the county executive, the comptroller, the legislature, is a combination?
The comptroller is ministerial. He can't
Carries out.
The only thing he can do is say, I'm sorry, we can't, which he's done. I am not going to bond out for $100 million now. I'm going to take the top 5 and we're going to bond out for $40 million, because that is all we can pay back at this point in time in there. And then we'll put the rest in a queue.
Right.
In there. That's the only decision that he can really make. The rest of us, we can make decisions to do some cuts, but it's mostly, I would say, the county executive that can do that. I write less bills. I don't feel that the success of a legislator is in
That's
the
right.
volume
I agree
of
with you.
bills that they put out.
agree.
I think it's a failure, the more bills, the more spending you put in. So,
It should be quality, not quantity.
correct, absolutely. I only go with necessity at this point in time, like weirs that could collapse.
Look, the main function of government is to protect its citizens. right?
Correct,
And that's, something that's
Correct.
got to be done.
correct. And people are struggling. Our seniors are struggling. I deal with them every day. I have people that can't afford. I will never forget, maybe 8 months ago, I had a father of 3 children start to cry on the phone. I cannot afford to take care of my family here anymore. That's horrible. That should never have to happen. That should never have to happen. It was over a speed camera
I see.
thing in there that brought him to that point where he felt like a failure in there. We have to make changes because people are leaving left, right, and upside down. And it's important to me that we have a middle class. It's very important to me that we have a middle class.
Yeah. You know, and it's something you see often, the jurisdictions or the states that tend to keep the taxes lower and are more fiscally responsible than some other states like New York, California, where they spend, and the people, they feel it. Why do you think people leave California and New York?
That's it.
Because they go to greener pastures. But I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight. I really
Pleasure.
appreciate
A
it.
pleasure.
We're going to be back in a few minutes with segment 2. I'm attorney Phil Giacino, and welcome back to Finding Common Ground here on Altice. We got 2 very informative segments coming up. The second segment has to do with frequently asked questions, and the third segment has to do with a really fun segment, I think. Has to do with criminal law, and it has to do with an area of the law where people often get it wrong. What do I mean by that? You ever hear someone yell, "I've been robbed," or "there's been a burglary," or "I've been assaulted"? You're going to see how often people are wrong when they use that terminology. They mean something else. We'll get to that. Let's get to it. The second segment has to do with frequently asked questions. These are questions that people ask me at the courthouse. I have friends, relatives sometimes ask me these questions, and I've compiled them through the years, and these are the questions I get asked often. First one is, what is a preliminary conference in a divorce action? A divorce action can start a number of ways. One is right away a party files a summons and complaint, or one attorney sends a letter to one of the parties, another, they hire an attorney, and then the 2 attorneys communicate back and forth with letters. They can exchange documents, they can exchange bank records, tax returns, pay stubs. But when a case can't be settled out of court, they have to have what they call a preliminary conference. That's the first time the parties come to court to meet with the judge, where the judge gets to talk to the attorneys. Sometimes they even get to talk to the parties with the attorneys present. And with that, there's a roadmap that's prepared. It's called the preliminary conference. It's filled out, are there kids involved? How long have the parties been married? Who are the attorneys? If there are kids, is custody an issue? Do we need an attorney for the child? It used to be called law guardian. Do we need to appraise a house? Is there a pension? All of these things get answered in the preliminary conference, which is about 5 to 6 pages. When it's done, the parties sign it, the attorneys sign it. The attorneys generally go in the back, speak to the judge, and sometimes the judge will come out and address the parties. I remember Judge Gargiulo, great judge. He doesn't do divorces anymore. I wish he still did. He would come out and he would give a little speech and he would say, I'm the judge, you each got good attorneys, listen to the attorneys, do what they tell you to do. And then he goes into some of the things that the parties can expect, like disclosure. Now, if you remember in My Cousin Vinny, when Vinny came back to meet with the DA, he had a box of files. And his girlfriend says, Mona Lisa Vita, you stole Trotter's files? And he says, no. He gave them to me. And then she says, do you want to know why he gave them to you? It's disclosure, you D-head. That's one of the things that Judge Gargiulo would say to the parties. Make them chuckle, but let them know there's certain procedures that have to be followed. You have to turn over documents, right? He would also tell another joke. He would say, it's kind of like a divorce is kind of like going to a French restaurant. When you're done, you're still hungry. Well, with a divorce, usually a compromise is reached. Nobody generally walks out high-fiving their attorney. Sometimes if you go to trial and you win big, you're happy. But a lot of times a case is resolved with a compromise. And a preliminary conference is the first step in the winding road to settle the divorce action. Second question, why do some cases go to trial? A little while ago I said most cases settle by way of compromise. The parties realize that this could be very expensive. They might not get what they want to get. Their attorney tells them, look, you have a pension, your wife's entitled to half your pension. Or if you're the non-custodial parent, you got to pay child support. Or if you make much more than your spouse, you're going to pay maintenance. These are things that the law dictate. It's not an opinion. If you make $100,000 and your spouse makes 20, you're going to be paying maintenance. Unless there's some big exception, that's how it goes. And the attorney will tell you that. If you were a police officer for 20 years and you were married for 20 years, your wife will get half, generally half of your pension. Unless there's horse trading going on, where maybe one party gets the house and the other party keeps their pension. But when a case can't get settled, it goes to trial. It certainly goes to court, and then if the judge can't help bring about a settlement, the case would go to trial. It can get very expensive. You don't always get what you want. I've seen cases where after trial, both parties are like, well, the schedule the judge just gave us really doesn't work. Well, you had the opportunity to settle your case without going to trial, where you could have got maybe half a loaf instead of no loaf, right? Meaning, hey, look, I'm the father, I want to see my kid. Tuesday's really the only day I can do it. Well, maybe you could have negotiated that. If you roll the dice, the judge might have forgot that and said, all right, the dad will get every Wednesday. Then what do? Always try to settle the case if you can. Next question. What is the difference between Supreme Court and family court? Supreme Court can handle just about any kind of case in New York. And we're talking about New York Supreme. So Suffolk Supreme Court could handle divorce cases, civil actions. It can handle personal injury. It can handle any case involving money. It can handle cases involving equity. Somebody sues, I don't want that tree to be chopped down. That's my tree, my neighbor wants to chop it down. That can go to Supreme Court. Then there are courts of what they call limited jurisdiction that can handle all these types of cases. One such case is family court. There is overlapping. You can go to Supreme Court and handle your divorce where they have custody cases. The case is resolved that way. Or family court. You could have custody or child support, orders of protection, things like that. Family court can handle the divorce. Family court can handle issues involving equitable distribution, the distribution of assets. That would be the house, a pension. Supreme Court, divorce part, would handle those kinds of cases. Family court can handle child support. Family court can handle custody. Family court can handle orders of protection, guardianship. They can handle maintenance issues, but they can't do equitable distribution. They can't give you a divorce. So if, let's say, money was an issue, but you want to resolve custody quickly, you don't have to file for divorce. You can file a petition for custody. Or let's say a parent wants child support quickly, but doesn't have the money to hire an attorney to go for a divorce, or doesn't want the divorce for some reason. You can file a petition for child support. That is done in family court. If money's not really an issue and you want a divorce and you want one-stop shopping, you go to Supreme Court. Next question. What can I do if I disagree with the decision of the support magistrate? The support magistrate decides issues regarding child support, maintenance, medical insurance, child care costs, those kinds of things the support magistrate has the ability to handle. Now, those things can be handled in a divorce action in Supreme Court. We just talked about that. But in family court, those issues are handled with a support magistrate, not a judge, not a referee. Custody, visitation or parenting time, orders of protection, those are generally handled by a judge or, in some cases, a referee. If it's a neglect, that would go before a judge. Neglect would be abuse or neglect of a child. So what if you don't agree with the decision of the child support magistrate after a hearing? Child support says the husband has to pay $500 a week. And the husband said, that's a bad decision, I disagree with it. He would file an objection. An objection is like an appeal, except it's not an appeal. An appeal would go to an appellate court, whether it be the appellate division or, let's say you appeal from Supreme Court or family court. It goes to the appellate division, Second Judicial Department. An objection would go to a judge, because remember, a support magistrate is not a judge. So if he or she makes a decision, money issue, and one of the litigants doesn't like the decision, They would file an objection that would go to a judge. You can appeal a judge's decision, but that's where it has to go first. So one party would file an objection, the other party would oppose those objections. A judge would make a decision. I had one not that long ago where the judge sided with my client, sent the case back, in fact, to a different support magistrate. We had a trial and we won. The first magistrate didn't give my client what he wanted. He got hurt bad by the decision. But the judge decided the case should go back before a different support magistrate and allow a hearing to take place. Next question. What can I do if I disagree with the judge's decision after trial? So let's say there's a full-blown trial in family court or in Supreme Court. You would appeal it, if you're here in Suffolk or Nassau County or Brooklyn, to Brooklyn, the Second Judicial Department. There are different departments. Upstate has their departments. Manhattan has a different department. You'd go to the second department. Now, some cases get to go to the Court of Appeals. That's the highest court in New York State. Just like the United States Supreme Court is the highest court in the country, the appellate division is a step toward the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals makes a decision, all the departments have to follow it. Second department makes a decision, the first department can be different and come up with something different. Court of Appeals has the final say in New York. And that's where an appeal would go. Very quickly, I once had an appeal where a judge made a decision to give my client's 2 kids to the father. We opposed that. We requested a stay, meaning the judge didn't carry out that order just yet. And we had the chance. In fact, I was in a hockey tournament in Connecticut, and working with my office, we put the paperwork together for the stay. We were granted the stay, and then ultimately I argued the case in Brooklyn, and we won. The judge, the appellate court, said that the 2 children in this case should go to their mom. They didn't even order a new trial. They just reversed the judge's decision and gave the kids to my client. Next question. How is the value of a personal injury case determined? So let's say there's a car accident and someone has a broken leg. I've handled cases like this. And the person is injured, has the broken leg. What is that case worth? Well, first of all, there has to be liability on the other side. So if my client's driving down the street and they hit a tree, they can't sue anybody. Right? They can receive compensation for their injury, not pain and suffering, things like that, but medical costs through no fault. But there's nobody to sue, so they're not going to get a windfall. But let's say you're driving down the street, like a case I had not that long ago, and somebody makes an illegal turn, hits my client, breaks her leg. Right? So you look at the extent of the injury. You need an injury. A broken leg is worth less than if the person was killed or if the person was paralyzed. Those cases are worth more than a simple, let's say, broken wrist or a broken leg. They look at the policy limits. So if I have a case and the policy limit is $100,000, and I think the case is worth $200,000, but I know the person doesn't have anything other than the policy, I might say to the client, look, take the $100,000, that's all you're going to get, right? Because you could go to a trial and win a $300,000 award. The insurance company only has to pay $100,000. You could go after, I once used that to my advantage, where we were going to sue, and the insured told the insurance company, look, pay them the money, because if we go to trial and I lose, there's going to be an additional sum. So they look at the extent of the injury, in other words, who's at, well, liability, who's at fault, the extent of the injury, the policy limits, those are all factored in. Stick around for segment 3. I'm attorney Phil Giacino, and welcome back to Finding Common Ground here on Altice. This is segment 3, and I think it's a lot of fun. Often you hear people say, I've been robbed, or I've been burglarized, or I've been assaulted. And they're not really getting it right, and I'll explain why. There are 4 crimes and 1 violation that I want to focus in on. First one is robbery. Robbery is forcible stealing, either force or the threat of force. Burglary is entering a dwelling, not a car, but a dwelling. It could be a commercial establishment, it could be a house. with the intent to commit a crime therein, or wrongfully remaining on the premises when you were told to leave, let's say. So you get there legally, and they say leave, and you don't. Larceny is stealing, plain and simple. There are different degrees. Petty larceny is up to 1,000. Over 1 million is grand larceny 1. But suffice it to say, for the purposes of our discussion, larceny is stealing property that doesn't belong to you. Next one is assault. Assault is with the intent to injure somebody, to cause an injury. You cause that injury. Again, different degrees. One, you could have assault third, which is only a misdemeanor, all the way up to assault in the first degree. The weapons are involved. It jacks up the charge. Or simple harassment with the intent to annoy, alarm, or harass. You slap, kick, shove, threaten somebody. So those are the crimes and the violation we're starting out with. Robbery. Sometimes people come home and they see their TV is gone and they said, I've been robbed. That's not robbery. That's burglary, where someone enters the dwelling with the intent to commit a crime therein. What's the crime? Stealing property. Could be a TV, could be watch, anything. So you enter that building with the intent to commit a crime. Robbery is a felony, and so is burglary. With robbery, you can have a situation, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're walking down a city street, and somebody comes over to you, and they pickpocket you. You don't even know it. Later on, you get home, and you look around, and you say, where the hell's my wallet? And it turns out that you were pickpocketed. You didn't know it at the time. Nobody came up to you and stuck a knife in your face or a gun to your head, but they took your wallet. You go to the police. What is that crime? Is it robbery? It's not, because there was no force used or the threat of force. Is it burglary? Of course not. No one entered a dwelling. It was a city street. It would be a larceny. Right? Depending on how much they stole, it could be a petty larceny, it could be a grand larceny third, second, and so on. Now, take that same scenario. You're walking down the street, and someone comes up to you, and they grab you by the arm, and they take your wallet, and they run. What is that? That's a robbery. They use force. That's also a larceny. They stole your property. So the person could be charged with a felony robbery and a larceny, depending on how much was stolen. It could be a misdemeanor or a felony. Now, it could also be the threat of force. If someone comes up and holds a knife and say, give me your wallet, right? They didn't necessarily use force. They didn't grab you. They didn't knock you to the ground. They didn't stab you, but they threatened you with force. So you knew if you didn't turn that wallet over or your money, you might be stabbed. Burglary, as we said, is entering a dwelling with the intent to commit a crime therein. Different types. Give you an example. Let's say you invite a friend over to watch the Super Bowl. And he comes in, and he has no bad intentions, and he's sitting down and he looks and he sees a nice wallet on the counter. Now, if he steals that wallet without force, so he just takes the wallet, leaves, and the homeowner later on says, oh, someone stole my wallet. What happened? They call the police. What would that person be charged with? It'd be a larceny. Would it be burglary? Not unless you could prove that the person entered that dwelling or remained there unlawfully with the intent to commit a crime therein, steal that wallet. So it would be a larceny. However, let's say the person comes over and they see that nice wallet there. And they go home and they say, well, geez, next time I get into Jacino's house and that wallet's there, I'm going to steal it. I call you up and I say, hey, come over, let's watch the ball game, a hockey game. Person comes over, they sit down, they see the wallet, it's still there, and they take it. If you can prove that they entered the dwelling with the intent to commit a crime therein, they can be charged not just with larceny, but with burglary. But you have to prove that intent. It's not always easy. I'll give you an example. Let's say he says to a friend, you know, Jacino leaves his wallet on the counter all the time. Next time I'm in there, I'm stealing it. If you had that person testify, it doesn't happen always that way, but that person could testify and say, Jones told me he was getting into that house to steal Jacino's wallet, you'd have a burglary. Let me give you the example using Elf. Remember that movie with Elf? He goes into Gimbel's and he hides. And when everyone leaves, he rolls out and he makes the place a magical Christmas wonderland. What would he be charged with? First of all, Gimbel's, if there's no damage, Gimbel's is probably going to say, we don't want to press charges. It's Christmas, the guy's an elf, we don't want to press charges. But what could they do? Is it burglary? Probably not. If his intention was to put a Lego set together and to cut up paper to make it look pretty or decorate a Christmas tree, that would in all likelihood not be burglary. It could be criminal trespass because he had no right to be there. That could be criminal trespass. Now, with a burglary, he would have to have entered that dwelling with the intent to commit a crime or remain there unlawfully. So let's say while he was there, he took property that didn't belong to him. Now, he may have entered Gimbel's lawfully. He came in, he had no intention of doing anything. But then when they said, Gimbel's is closing in 10 minutes, he hides. His intention is to hide so nobody sees him, so when they leave, he could take property that doesn't belong to him. Right? It happens often. Not necessarily with Elf, but people can go into a store, hide, and then steal property when it's closed. And they get out and they don't get caught. With cameras and security, it's a lot harder than it used to be, but that was something that you saw years ago. So again, burglary, enter a dwelling with the intent to commit a crime therein. Interesting story. When I was in Florida years ago, I was an assistant DA and I was going to a wedding in Florida. And somebody that I knew was in, I guess it was a fender bender, but it turned into like a road rage situation. And the person that I knew wanted the person who hit his car to stay and not leave. The person tried to leave, and the person that I knew reached into the car, turned the keys, actually took the keys out so that person couldn't drive away. I get the call that the person was arrested. It wasn't a relative, someone I knew. And first thing I was told was they were charged with burglary. I'm thinking to myself, in New York, that would not be a burglary because that's not a dwelling. In Florida, different law. Florida has a law that says if you enter a dwelling or such as an automobile, camper, trailer, it extends to that. New York, we don't have that. So that would be another type. It could be harassment. It could be a larceny. You took property, the keys that didn't belong to you, but it wouldn't be a burglary. In Florida, it was. So larceny is taking property that doesn't belong to you, not by force. So if you take it by force, it could be a larceny and also a robbery. Larceny, if you go into CVS and you steal a pack of gum, that is called petty larceny. That is a misdemeanor. Nobody gets charged with burglary when you steal property like that. They charge them with petty larceny. If it's more than $1,000, so if you go in to Best Buy and you steal a couple of TVs and it's $1,100, that's now grand larceny fourth. More than $3,000, grand larceny third. It goes up. If you steal certain documents that have value, that could mean a higher elevated charge. That's larceny. Now, assault and harassment, people get that confused all the time. I've had people come up to me and say, that person shoved me. They assaulted me. No, they didn't. That would be harassment. Assault is with the intent to cause physical injury, not hurt feelings, not a slap to the face. That's not even an assault. Assault would be you punch somebody, you break their nose. That's an assault. You punch them and there's a laceration to the eye. They get a concussion. You break their arm. Those are degrees of assault. If you use a weapon to do it, could be assault in the first degree if you use a gun, let's say. Or let's say you're a trained martial arts expert. It could elevate it because you're a deadly weapon, as opposed to some average person punching somebody. So there are things that can elevate it. So that's an assault. Has to be a physical injury, and you had to intend to cause it. What's interesting is there's a thing called transferred intent. You see that a lot in civil cases, because the law says such injury to that person or third person. So let's say I go up to someone and I go to punch him, and I miss, and I hit the guy standing behind him and I break his nose. That's an assault on that other person, because I had the intent to punch somebody, I missed. I still had the intent to injure somebody if I'm throwing a hard punch. I miss. Otherwise, you could say, well, I didn't mean to hit the guy behind him, so I go scot-free. No, you're going to be charged with assault for assaulting that third party. That's different if it was a mistake. Let's say I go to stretch, and I raise my arms, and there's a guy standing right behind me, and I hit him in the nose and I break it. That's not necessarily an assault. If I was reckless, if I just start swinging my arms randomly and I hit somebody, that's reckless. That's also part of an assault. So it could be recklessly causing the injury. It could be criminal negligence. It's a form of negligence, a hire. So let's say I have a bow and arrow and I'm shooting it, and I'm careless and I just shoot it up in the air and it falls and hits somebody in the shoulder. That could be assault. I maybe didn't intend to cause that injury, but I was criminally negligent or I was reckless, a higher standard. Harassment is just the annoyance or the alarm of someone by shoving, slapping, or threatening. So if I go up to somebody and I say, I'm going to kill you, that is harassment. That's not an assault. If I carried it out, then it's a higher crime. But if I just, now people come up to me and says, they called me the most horrible things imaginable. Free speech. You could insult somebody. You might get sued if you say that person is a thief or something like that, and they're not. They might be able to sue you civilly. But the annoyance, alarm, harassment, where you shove, slap, kick somebody. So if I go up to somebody and I slap them, that's not my style, but if I slap somebody, that's harassment. That's a violation of law. At most, it would be 15 days in jail. Generally, I'd pay a fine. The person would get an order of protection, and we would go from there, and I'd have to leave that person alone. So hopefully that was informative, and now you have a little better understanding of robbery, burglary, larceny, assault, and harassment. Thanks for watching the show. You have a good day.